My wife secretly planned a getaway with her affair partner while I believed we were building a future together. But instead of confronting her directly, I chose to ghost her completely, leaving her confused, desperate, and shocked when she finally realized I had already moved on without a single explanation. I'm writing this because I need to get it out. Maybe someone else will read this and learn from my mistakes. Maybe not. Either way, I can't carry this alone anymore. 3 months ago, I thought I was living the perfect. Sarah and I had been married for 8 years. We had 2 kids, Emily 6 and Jakey 4. I worked overtime constantly building what I thought was our dream. New house in the suburbs. Family vacations we couldn't really afford but took anyway because memories matter more than money, right? I was in. The first appeared on a Tuesday. Sarah's phone kept buzzing during dinner. She'd glance at it, smile this little secret smile, then flip it face down. When Emma asked who was texting, Sarah said, "Just work stuff, sweetie," without missing a, but I knew her work smile. This wasn't it. I started noticing things. She'd take calls in the garage, new clothes appearing in her closet, staying late at team building events I'd never heard of before, the way she'd turn her body away from me when typing messages. Know that feeling when drowning but are still above water? That's what those weeks felt like. I kept telling I was being paranoid. Marriage gets routine after 8 years. People change. People grow. People lie. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Sarah was in the shower, and her phone lit on the nightstand. The preview showed enough. "Can't wait for our weekend getaway. I've already booked the cabin." My hand started shaking as I read it. The sender was Michael from her office. The same Michael she'd mentioned casually over the past few months. "Oh, Michael had a funny story today. Michael thinks we should try that new restaurant. Michael this, Michael that." I sat on our bed staring at that phone screen until it went black. 8 years, 2 kids, a mortgage, we'd built together, brick by brick, and she was planning romantic weekends with someone else. The shower was still running. Steam was creeping under the bathroom door. I could hear her humming some song I didn't recognize. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream or throw things or demand explanations. I didn't even let cry, though God knows I wanted to. Instead grabbed my laptop and started planning my exit. By the time Sarah came out of the bathroom in her towel, asking what I wanted for dinner, I'd already started moving money to a separate account. I'd researched divorce lawyers. I'd begun mentally cataloging which things in our house were actually mine versus ours versus hers. "Whatever want," I told her, not looking from my laptop. "I'm not really hungry." She laughed in the top of my head. "Worked too hard. Maybe we should plan a weekend getaway soon. Just the 2 of us." The casual cruelty of that moment still takes my breath away. Over the next 2 weeks I became a ghost in my own. I documented everything. Screenshots of suspicious texts when she left her phone around. Photos of receipts I found in her purse for places she'd never mentioned going. A paper trail of lies wrapped in normal family dinners and bedtime stories. I called in sick to work and followed her one afternoon. Watched her meet Michael at a coffee shop downtown. Watched them hold hands across the table. Watched her lean in on him like she used to me. That night, she came home and asked about my day like nothing had happened. Helped Jake with his alphabet homework. Tucked Emma in and sang her favorite lullaby. The compartmentalization was breathtaking. I hired the lawyer the next morning. Filed the papers that afternoon. Had them served to her at work 3 days later. I didn't tell her I was leaving. I didn't explain why. I just disappeared. The morning I moved out I waited until she left for work. Emma and Jake were at school. The house was empty and quiet. I packed my clothes, my books, some photos of the kids and my laptop. Everything else could stay or for all I cared. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to a note that said, "The kids will be staying with my sister until we figure things out. Don't contact me directly. All communication goes through my lawyer now." That was it. 8 years reduced to 2 sentences. I drove to a motel across town and checked in for a week. Then I turned off my phone and waited. The calls started around noon. 12 missed calls by 2 p.m. By evening she'd sent 47 text messages ranging from confused to angry to desperate to heartbroken. She drove to the motel. I watched from my window as she pounded on the front desk, demanding to know if I was there. I didn't answer. I didn't explain. I didn't give her the confrontation she was looking for. For the first time in months I slept through the night. But that's when the real consequences started. And that's when I learned that sometimes the cruelest thing can do to someone isn't anger or violence or screaming. Sometimes it's silence. Sarah had betrayed our marriage, yes. She'd lied to my face for months. She'd planned romantic getaways while I was working overtime to pay for our kids' future. But what I did next would make me question everything I thought I knew about right and wrong, justice and revenge, and whether some wounds ever actually heal. The kids started asking questions I wasn't prepared to answer. Emma wanted to know why Daddy wasn't coming home. Jake kept asking if he'd done something wrong. My sister, God bless her, tried to shield them, but 6-year-olds aren't. Is Mommy sad because of me? Emma asked one night. I didn't know how to explain that Mommy was sad because Daddy had found out about her secret friend and decided to disappear instead of for their family like a man should have. 3 days after the papers were served, Sarah's best friend called me. "She's falling apart," she said. "She won't eat, she won't sleep. She keeps driving by places she thinks might be. This is her." I said and hung. But it wasn't good. Nothing about this was good, because while I was busy being coldly strategic about my exit, I was watching my children's world crumble in real time. Emma stopped talking in complete sentences. They'd been collateral damage in a war between 2 adults who'd forgotten how to communicate. The worst part, I was starting to feel powerful, in control, like I was finally the one holding all the cards instead of being the fool who worked late while his wife planned weekend trips with another man. Sarah had betrayed me, but I was about to discover that my silent treatment was its own kind of cruelty. One that would leave scars on everyone involved, including me. The phone calls from her family started next. Her mother, her sister, even her father, who'd never liked me, called to ask what I thought I was doing. She made a mistake, her mother pleaded. People make mistakes. Have children together. Can't just disappear. But I could. And I did. What I didn't realize yet, what disappearing wouldn't make the pain go away. It would just change who was carrying it. If read my first post, no, I chose to ghost my cheating wife instead of confronting her. 2 weeks later, I'm starting to understand why they say revenge is a dish best served never. The kids are with me now, staying at my sister's house. It's temporary until I can figure out something more permanent. Emma has started asking the same question every morning. When are we going home, Daddy? How to explain to a 6-year-old that home doesn't exist anymore. That mommy made choices that broke the family, but Daddy made choices that might have shattered it beyond repair. Sarah's attempts to reach me have escalated. She shows at my work now. Security has had to her out twice. My coworkers look at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. The office gossip mill is having a field day. Heard wife's been causing scenes in the lobby. My manager said yesterday. Everything okay at home? Not really, I told him. But it will be. Another lie. Nothing feels like it will ever be okay again. Last Tuesday, Sarah cornered my sister at Emma's school pickup. According to Lisa, Sarah looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her hair was unwashed. She was wearing the same clothes she'd had on the day before when she'd shown at my office. Please. Sarah begged Lisa. Just tell me what I did wrong. I found the divorce papers but he won't talk to me. I don't understand what's happening. Lisa, God bless her protective instincts, told Sarah exactly what she thought of wives who plan romantic getaways with men who aren't their husbands. Sarah apparently went white as a sheet and sat down right there in the school parking lot. How did he find out? Sarah whispered. Lee's it back. Got caught. He left. Maybe try explaining that to children. But here's the thing that's eating me alive. Sarah genuinely seemed shocked. Not just that I'd found out but that I'd reacted this way. Like she'd expected anger, fighting, maybe even counseling. She'd never considered that I might just vanish. The Michael situation imploded spectacularly. Turns out, he wasn't planning to leave his own wife for Sarah. When the drama started affecting his reputation at work, he requested a transfer to another department and stopped returning Sarah's calls. Sarah's sister called me last week. She's been abandoned by everyone, she said. Her boyfriend dumped her the moment things got complicated. Her husband disappeared without explanation. She's falling apart. She made her choices, I said. So did, she replied. And choices are kids just as much as hers did. That hit harder than I wanted to admit. Emma started therapy last week. The therapist asked to speak with both parents. I showed. Sarah didn't know I'd be there. Seeing her face to face for the first time since I'd left was like taking a punch to the stomach. She'd lost weight. Her eyes were red and hollow. She looked broken in a way that should have felt satisfying but instead made me feel sick. Can we please talk after this? She whispered as we sat in the waiting room. I stared straight ahead. My lawyer handles all communication. I'm not talking to lawyer, she hissed. I'm talking to my husband. The father of my children. The man I've been married to for 8 years. Should have thought about that before started planning weekend trips with Michael. The way her face crumpled was devastating. But I felt nothing. Or I told I felt nothing. The therapist called us in together. Emma sat between us, looking tiny in the big chair. Dr. Martinez asked her some gentle questions about how she was feeling. I think mommy and daddy are mad at each other, Emma said in her small voice. But they won't tell me why. And I think it's my fault because I was bad at school last week. Sarah started crying. Actual, silent tears streaming down her face. I kept my expression neutral but inside I was screaming. Emma, Dr. Martinez said gently, sometimes adults have problems that have nothing to do with kids. It's never fault when grown-ups are upset. Then why won't daddy come home? Emma asked. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at me with something that looked like hope. Like maybe this was the moment I'd finally explain. Finally give her the confrontation she'd been desperately seeking for weeks. Instead I said, sometimes families change, sweetheart, but mommy and daddy both love very much. That never changes. Sarah's hope died right there in that chair. I watched it happen. After the session she followed me to the parking lot. Please, she said. I know I messed, I know I made terrible choices. But this silences me. It's the kids. Can't we at least try to talk about this like adults? I turned around and looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman I'd shared a bed with for 8 years. Who'd held my hand during my father's funeral. Who'd stayed all night when Jake had pneumonia. Who'd celebrated every promotion, every small victory, every ordinary Tuesday that May are together. Want to talk? I asked. Yes, she breathed. Please. Yes, fine. Here's what I have to say. Planned a romantic getaway with another man while I was working overtime to pay for our kids' future. Lied to my face for months. Made me feel crazy for noticing changes in behavior. Him in public where anyone could have seen. Betrayed 8 years of marriage for what? Some excitement, some validation, some fantasy that he was going to save from boring with me. She was sobbing now, but I wasn't done. Want to know why I didn't confront? Because there's nothing could say that would fix this. No explanation that would make it okay. No apology that would undo the damage. So I chose to save us both the pointless drama and just leave. But we could try. She whispered. People work through affairs. We could go to counseling. We could figure this out. No, I said. We couldn't. Because I don't want to. I don't want to spend the next however many years wondering who we're texting. I don't want to have to check on or verify stories or live with the constant capable of this level of deception. I'd rather be alone. I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing there in the parking lot. That was 5 days ago. She hasn't tried to contact me since, but the silence that felt so powerful at first now feels hollow. Emma keeps asking when we're going home. Jake has started having nightmares. My sister is being incredibly patient, but I can see the strain of suddenly having 3 extra people in her house. Work is awkward. Friends don't know what to say. I'm getting divorced from someone I never actually broke with. We're dismantling 8 years of marriage through lawyers and legal documents instead of human conversation. Yesterday I ran into Sarah's mother at the grocery store. She looked at me with such disappointment that I almost left my cart and walked out. No, she said quietly, Sarah called me crying yesterday. She said she finally understands why I left the way I did. Oh. She said she realizes now that the cruelest thing could do wasn't yell at her or with her or even throw her out. The cruelest thing was to make her invisible. To treat her like she never mattered at all. She paused, studying my face. But here's what I want to know, do feel better now? Does making her feel invisible make feel powerful? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like just as miserable as she is. Except now kids get to watch both their parents fall apart instead of just one. I didn't have an answer for that. Last night, I was putting Emma to bed and she asked me, "Daddy, do you still love mommy?" I sat there for a long time, looking at this little person who shouldn't have to ask questions like that. "It's complicated, sweetheart," I finally said. "Did she do something really bad?" Another impossible question. How to explain betrayal to who still believes in fairy tales and happy endings? "She made some choices that daddy's feelings," I said. "But made choices too, right?" That's what Aunt Lisa said. Out of the mouths of, "The divorce will be final in a few months. Sarah will get the house in primary custody. I'll get weekend visits and child support payments. We'll coordinate schedules through a family app and see each other at school plays and soccer games and birthday parties for the rest of our lives. But we'll never actually speak about what happened, never get closure, never understand each other's perspectives or find any kind of peace." I chose silence as my weapon and it worked. I wounded her as deeply as she wounded me. The problem is I wounded too, and worse, I wounded Emma and Jake in ways that might never fully heal. Tonight, as I write this, I keep thinking about what I could have done differently. What would have happened if I'd confronted her that night instead of planning my escape? If I'd demanded the truth instead of conducting surveillance? If I'd fought for our marriage instead of just abandoning it? Maybe we would have ended divorced anyway. Maybe the betrayal was too deep to overcome. But maybe Emma wouldn't be wetting the bed, and Jake wouldn't be having nightmares, and Sarah wouldn't look like a ghost of herself. Maybe we all would have suffered less. The silence that felt so righteous now just feels empty. I got my revenge, but revenge tastes like nothing at all. It's been 6 months since I walked out. 3 months since my last update. The divorce papers came through last week. Sarah kept the house. I get Emma and Jake every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. We've spoken exactly once since that day in the therapist parking lot. That conversation happened 2 weeks ago, and it's the reason I'm writing this final update. Because I need to understand what my silence actually accomplished, what it cost, what it did to real people with real feelings who didn't deserve to become casualties in my war against betrayal. Emma started first grade this fall. At the parent-teacher conference, Mrs. Patterson asked to speak with me privately. "Emma's struggling," she said gently. "She's behind in reading, which is unusual for kids her age. But more concerning is her social behavior. She doesn't trust easily. She keeps asking her classmates if they're going to disappear like Daddy did." I sat in that tiny plastic chair, surrounded by finger paintings and alphabet charts, and felt something inside me break. "She thinks abandoned her," Mrs. Patterson continued. "She knows Mommy did something wrong, but she doesn't understand why that means Daddy had to leave too. In her mind, if Mommy can make Daddy disappear, what's to stop her from disappearing too?" That night, I called Sarah for the first time in months. "We need to talk," I said when she answered. There was a long pause, then quietly, "Okay." We met at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. Center, yes, but also somehow older. Like she'd aged years and months. She was wearing her wedding ring, which surprised me. "Thank for calling," she said when I sat down. "Emma's having problems at school," Sarah nodded. "I know. Jake too. He's been acting out in daycare. Hitting other kids. The teachers think he's angry but doesn't know how to express it." We sat in silence for a moment. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I need to know something," Sarah said finally. "About Michael. About what happened. I want to hear about him." "Me too," she said firmly. "Because I've spent 6 months assuming know the whole story and don't." I started to get. She grabbed my wrist. "Please," she said. "For Emma and Jake. They deserve parents who at least understand what destroyed their family." I sat back down. "It started as friendship," Sarah said, staring at her coffee cup. "We're working so much. 70-hour weeks, remember? Emma would ask when Daddy was coming home and I'd have to tell her we're at the office again. Jake stopped looking for at bedtime because we're never there. I was providing for our family." "I know," she said. "I know we're." And I was grateful, but I was also desperately lonely. Michael noticed. He asked how I was doing. Actually asked and waited for a real answer. "When was the last time did that?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. I couldn't remember. "I was innocent at first," she continued. "Coffee after meetings. Conversations about work. About he listened when I talked about feeling invisible in my own marriage. About feeling like a single parent even though I had a husband. So decided to have an affair." "No," she said sharply. "I decided to feel human again." Affair. That happened gradually. A touch on the shoulder. Sitting too close during meetings. Text messages that got more personal. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already emotionally involved. She was crying now, but quietly. "Not for show. The getaway weekend," she said. "The one saw the text about I never went." I stared at her. "What? I never went. I canceled the night before. Because even though things had gotten inappropriate with Michael, even though I'd crossed lines I shouldn't have crossed, I couldn't actually go through with betraying like that. I couldn't do that to Emma and Jake." My world tilted sideways. "But I saw with him. At the coffee shop him." "Yes," she whispered. "I did, and I hated for it. That's why I was ending things with him. That coffee meeting was me telling him it was over. That I'd made terrible choices but I wasn't going to destroy my family. I felt like I was drowning. We're ending it. I was trying to save our marriage," she said. "I was going to tell everything. Ask for forgiveness. Suggest counseling. I'd already made an appointment with a therapist. But then disappeared. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Never gave me the chance to choose our family," she said. "Decided for both of us that the marriage was over. Took away my opportunity to for us." I sat there, processing this information. It changed everything and nothing simultaneously. Would it have mattered? I asked finally. "I've told me." Sarah considered this. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe not. Maybe the damage was already done. But we'll never know, will we? Because chose silence over communication. Chose assumptions over truth. Chose revenge over repair. She was right, and I hated her for being right. I lost everything too," she continued. "My marriage. My children's stability. My reputation. Michael made it clear he wasn't leaving his wife, especially not for someone whose was falling apart. I got abandoned by everyone, including the person I'd expected at least for what we'd built together. I was protected. We're punishing me," she corrected. "And Emma and Jake got caught in the crossfire." We talked for another hour. About logistics, about the kids, about how to minimize the ongoing damage to their sense of security. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, and it was happening as divorced strangers in a public coffee shop. As we were leaving, Sarah said something that's haunted me every day since. I know I broke trust, she said. I know I made terrible choices that deeply. But broke something too. Broke the possibility of healing. Broke the chance for our children to see their parents work through problems together. Broke the idea that love means fighting for each other instead of just walking away. I drove home to my empty apartment and sat in the silence I'd chosen. The kids came for their weekend visit last Saturday. Emma brought a drawing from school. It was supposed to be our family, but she'd drawn mommy and the kids in one house and daddy another house far away with a big space between them. Why is daddy so far away? I asked. Because that's where it chose to be, she said matter-of-factly. Jake, who's 4 and doesn't understand the complexities of relationships, asked his usual question, when are coming home daddy? This is my home now, I told him, but what about our home? The one with my toys in my room and mommy. I didn't have an answer that would make sense to a 4-year-old. How to explain that daddy chose pride over presence, that daddy decided being right was more important than being there. Yesterday was Emma's school play. Sarah and I sat on opposite sides of the auditorium. Emma kept looking back and forth between us during her performance, like she was hoping we'd somehow end sitting together. After the show, she ran to us with bright eyes and said, "Did both see me?" "We saw, sweetheart," Sarah said. "We're amazing, can we all go get ice cream together?" To celebrate. The hope in her voice was devastating. "Daddy has to go back to his apartment," I said. "But mommy can take for ice cream." Emma's face fell. "Why can't we all go together? We used to do things together." "Because some things change, honey," Sarah said gently. Me a look that said everything. I watched them walk away together, Emma's small hand in Sarah's, and realized that my silence hadn't protected me from pain, it had just redistributed it. Instead of dealing with the sharp, acute pain of betrayal and confrontation, I'd chosen the dull, chronic ache of regret and isolation. Sarah was wrong about one thing though. Love isn't always about fighting for each other. Sometimes love is knowing when broken something beyond repair and having the courage to let it go. But she was right about everything else. I chose silence over communication. I chose assumptions over truth. I chose my wounded pride over my children's stability. I chose to be right over being present. The affair might have ended our marriage eventually anyway. The betrayal deep and trust once broken is nearly impossible to rebuild. But my response ensured that we'd never even try. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a studio apartment on the wrong side of town, seeing my children every other weekend, and realizing that the silence I thought was my strength was actually my cowardice. Sarah made terrible choices that me deeply. But I made a choice too. I chose to disappear instead of fighting for what we'd built. I chose to punish her instead of protecting our family. I chose revenge over responsibility. And now Emma draws pictures with daddy far away from everyone else. Jake asks when I'm coming home to a home that no longer exists. Sarah wears her wedding ring to remind herself of promises that were broken by both of us in different ways. The silence that felt so powerful in the beginning now just echoes in an empty apartment, where 2 children visit their father like he's a distant relative instead of someone who used to tuck them in every night. I got my revenge. Sarah paid for her betrayal with the loss of her family, her reputation, and her sense of self-worth. But revenge is supposed to feel satisfying, and this just feels hollow. If we're reading this and are facing betrayal alone, learn from my mistakes. Choose conversation over silence. Choose healing over revenge. Choose to for family instead of just walking away. Because once disappear, once choose silence as weapon, don't just wound the person who you wound everyone who ever loved, including